Welcome to the Cubos.com event spotlight, today featuring the Square-1.
The Square-1 was actually invented all the way back in 1990, and it was soon thereafter also patented by two Czech inventors, Karel Hirschel and Wojciech Kopsky.
The Square-1 was included in the first modern Rubik's Cube World Championship in 2003. The Square-1 is unique in that it is the only puzzle that does change shape that you actually compete with. And it is also one of the hardest, and we will get back to that one later.
So due to the lack of similarities between the classic Rubik's Cube and the Square-1, the Square-1 is usually one of the last events that newcomers try to learn and compete in. And also considering the lack of similarities, knowledge transfer from the 3x3 is quite limited. You will need to learn a lot of new algs and a lot of new techniques to be able to master the Square-1.
Speaking of the algorithms, it's actually no more the right, up, down, and so on. You'll be using numbers. The notation looks something like this. But once mastered, this cube can actually be solved in just a few seconds. So even though it is among the hardest ones, it doesn't take as long as solving, for example, a 7x7.
The Square-1 is quite hard to figure out on your own, even if you know how to solve the classic Rubik's Cube. So if you're up for a challenge and haven't tried it yet, the Square-1 will definitely be quite interesting for you. But it is likely possible for those of you who have quite some experience in the speed cubing world first.
When the event premiered in 2003, Lars Vandenbergh won the event with a single time of 41 seconds, 0.8.
And even after the event has continued to gain in popularity ever since, the legacy of Lars Vandenbergh actually remains in that the most popular method even to this day is the Vandenbergh method, which we will get back to later.
While the event has been held in 102 countries of the 120 which have had competitions, it is not as popular as, for example, the 3x3, and we have seen about 700,000 solves, which is 10% of the almost 8 million solves in the regular 3x3.
Speaking of records, the current WR is 3.41 seconds by Ryan Pilot, and the average is 4.63 by Samir Agarwal. Speaking about the European records, on the other hand, those are both held by Alessandro Ricci at 3.61 for the single and 5.43 for the average.
The US has definitely dominated the Square-1 scene the latest few years, and we actually have 6 out of 9 top solvers in Square-1 being American.
Speaking about European top solvers, we again have Alessandro Ricci from Italy, but we also need to mention, for example, from Poland, Michał Kraszowski, and from Denmark, Erasmus Stubb Detlefsen. When talking about Square-1 records, as Swedes, we definitely need to mention the latest WR on the Swedish speedcubing scene, and that's my friend Helmer Evert. Actually, it's got his 6.67 WR single in my old hometown of Flen, so that's always quite a nice memory.
So when solving the Square-1, you usually do some intuitive turns so that you get a shape that you recognize, and from that part you do learn some algorithms to get it into the cube shape. Gradually you learn some more intermediary cube shapes to shorten the solve, and finally you learn 99 algorithms to always be able to solve the cube shape at once.
After the cube shape part, this is where the methods split, so Vandenbergh and Lin separates in their solution. The Vandenbergh method is divided into 4 basic steps. You first do corner orientation, so CO, orienting all the corners so that all the corners show the same color on the top and bottom. Then you do the same for edges, that will be EO. After that, you approach the permutation of the corners, that will be CP. And finally, you also permute the edges on both layers, that would be EP. So if you want to get world class with the Vandenbergh method, you will still need to learn a lot more algs. The first step would likely be learning OBL, which is orienting both of the layers at once, combining the CO and EO steps. And then you can also learn PBL, which is hundreds of algs, where you actually permute both of the layers at once, combining the CP and EP steps. And even after that, this is like only a few people in the world know this, but you can start learning OBLP, which is predicting the OBL even from inspection, enabling two-look solves.
So in the Lin method, you start with building a block on the bottom left side of the cube, which is 2 corners and the edge piece. And then you do the same for the right side of the cube. After that, you put in the two edges on the bottom layers to complete the bottom layer. And after that, that means you only have PLL left to do for the top layer to complete the solve. The advanced version of this method is called PLL plus 1, which means instead of solving both the two edges on the bottom, you solve one of them and then you do the PLL plus 1, meaning the final edge on the bottom side, including the PLL in one algorithm.
We also need to talk about parity, and that's actually quite an important part of a Square-1 solve. So the classic approach will be to just do your cube shape, do your solve as normal, and then when you get, for example, to the last layer, you noticed, oh, I have parity, so I need to do a parity al to then be able to solve the Square-1 normally. In around 2017 and 2018, however, a cube shape parity started gaining popularity, and that's actually a method where you trace your Square-1 cube shape scramble and see, do I have parity? And then you adjust the cube shape solution in some way, usually not even adding that many moves. You just adjust the solution of the cube shape slightly so that you avoid parity later in the solve. That might not sound like a huge difference, but since you can sometimes avoid parity without even adding any moves, that can save you a lot of moves and time later in the solve. That's pretty much the main barrier between casual level and world-class level Square-1 solving.
So other than that, the main approach to improving in Square-1 is simply to learn more algorithms. Doing things like practicing look ahead is not as important on the Square-1 as it is, for example, on the 3x3. And that leads me perfectly into event critique, and the main critique of the Square-1 event is that it is very alg-based.
So another common critique of the event is that it's quite luck-based. So first we need to talk about the cube shape, and you can sometimes solve it in one slice and sometimes you need up towards 7 slices to solve the cube shape. But then also the parity steps adds a lot of time to the solve, and it's a 50-50 chance if you get parity or not. So for the casual solver, these two aspects alone will decide quite heavily what your time will be and not even being affected by your performance.
Another critique of the event, or maybe more like the cube itself, is that there aren't actually many good options. For the budget option, the only thing we really have is the Chifa Square-1, and the mid-tier is the Yushin Square-1, both of them being pretty cheap and both of them being pretty bad. And finally, we have the MGC Square-1, which is pretty much the Square-1 everyone uses today. It costs about 19 euros and is by far the best Square-1 you can buy, even though it isn't even that good. We do have some solvers still using the X-Men Volt V2, but this one has been discontinued for a long time now.
In the 3x3 video, we talked about 3x3 cubes with a luxury feeling or at a luxury price point. There aren't any Square-1s in this category to talk about, unfortunately. But there are rumors about the GAN Square-1, which could drop this year, or knowing GAN, it will likely be next year. But that's definitely interesting. It could uproot the Square-1 market.
So if you're at all interested in the Square-1, I would definitely recommend the MGC, which is linked in the description below.